Okay, let's dive in. We often hear that phrase, necessity is the mother of invention.
Hmm.
But what about when that necessity is, say, global health access? And the invention is, well, maybe an economic lifeline tied to travel.
It's a fascinating intersection, and that's exactly what we're looking at today.
Right, we're doing a deep dive into a really specific initiative, a kind of strategic mix of travel and public health. People have even called it vaccine tourism.
That's a term, yeah.
Yeah.
We've been looking through the sources, and it details Guam's really uh, quite deliberate plan here.
Yeah.
This wasn't just, random chance. It
Right.
was a strategic move, using vaccine availability, specifically those FDA-approved ones, as a direct tool for economic recovery, and aimed at a very, very specific type of traveler.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to unpack the mechanics. How did it actually work? Who exactly were they targeting? Because that demographic is, like you said, fascinatingly specific. And maybe most importantly, what hurdles did they face? Logistical, political, the whole thing. It's like an economic pivot wrapped up in public health policy.
And they even gave it a snappy name, which helps. AirVNV
Airbnb.
stands for Vaccination and Vacation. Pretty clear branding.
Yeah. It is effective. It tells you exactly what the deal is, right? Health access, but also a travel experience, a transaction. Okay, so let's start with the core problem they identified, this expat gap, as we're calling it.
Right. The opportunity was pretty significant, and it all came down to logistics and, well, jurisdiction, really.
Okay.
Think about American expatriates living across Asia-Pacific, maybe in Japan, South Korea, the Philippines.
Right, lots of Americans working or living there.
Exactly. And for months, they were watching the U.S. mainland get vaccines rolled out pretty quickly, while their own host countries, well, they were often slower. And crucially, they didn't always have easy access to the specific vaccines approved by the FDA.
Ah, so that's the key, the FDA approval.
That's the hook. So Guam steps in. As a U.S. territory, Guam gets those same FDA-approved vaccines.
Okay.
They saw this critical unmet need among U.S. citizens living abroad and basically said, hey, come here, we've got what you need within U.S. jurisdiction. It's like a domestic solution to an international problem for those specific people.
That does sound like a potential win-win.
That's how tourism officials pitched it, absolutely. For the expats, maybe hundreds of thousands of them, it's vital access to shots they might wait months for otherwise.
And for Guam.
For Guam, whose tourism sector just, well, collapsed because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
This was a potential lifeline, an immediate revenue stream.
But there's a catch, isn't there? Which brings us back to the vacation part of Airbnb. It wasn't optional.
Not at all. Because the main vaccines on offer, like Moderna or Pfizer, they need 2 doses.
Right, spaced weeks apart.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
you couldn't just fly in for a weekend, get your shot, and leave. That wasn't going to work.
So how long are we talking?
The sources suggest a minimum stay, typically 3 to 4 weeks. Minimum.
3 to 4 weeks. That's not a typical vacation.
No way. Think about it. A normal tourist might stay, 4 or 5 days?
Yeah.
An Airbnb traveler needed to basically set up shop for almost a month.
Wow. Okay, that completely changes the kind of traveler and what they need, doesn't it? They're not just tourists anymore.
They're temporary residents, essentially.
Yeah.
They keep working, keep their lives going. So many would likely be working remotely during that waiting period between doses and maybe during recovery.
So the infrastructure needed is different, too. You can't just stick them in a standard hotel room for 3 nights.
Precisely. This is where the type of accommodation becomes critical. They're looking for reliable, extended stay options.
Like service departments or hotels geared towards longer stays.
Exactly that. Places where you can comfortably live and work for weeks. Maybe even needing access to serviced offices or good remote work setups. Companies like Move and Stay specialize in exactly this kind of thing, connecting business travelers and expats with those longer-term serviced apartments and hotels across Asia-Pacific.
Yeah.
That kind of infrastructure is key for the vacation, or rather the extended stay, to actually work.
That makes sense. If you're asking someone to stay for 25 days instead of 4.
The economic impact multiplies dramatically. It's not just the room rate. It's groceries, local transport, maybe using local services. It feeds much more into the local economy.
So this extended stay model, it was really baked into their whole recovery strategy. Let's talk more about that strategy. From the Guam Visitors Bureau, the GVB.
Well, the GVB was, frankly, in a tough spot. Their main markets, historically, Japan and South Korea.
Big tourism drivers for them, usually.
Huge.
Yeah.
But travel from there basically stopped, and their own vaccination rates were initially quite low. So Just waiting for Japan and Korea to come back online, that wasn't a short-term fix.
So the pandemic kind of forced their hand on diversifying their market.
Under duress, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was quite clever, really. Instead of waiting for, foreign governments to sort out vaccine rollout, something totally out of Guam's control,
Right.
they focused on a group they could reach. American citizens abroad, a group with a guaranteed demand for the specific product Guam could offer those FDA vaccines.
And they probably felt some urgency, too.
Definitely. They were essentially in a race. They wanted to capture this specific group of travelers before they decided to go somewhere else.
Like where?
The sources specifically mention Hawaii as a competitor. Hawaii also falls under U.S. jurisdiction, offers the same vaccines.
Ah, okay. So Guam needed an edge.
Right. So the pitch wasn't just get your shot. It was more like get your shot here. We're closer for many of you in Asia, and we understand you need a place to stay and work comfortably for several weeks while you wait for that second dose.
So the extended stay infrastructure, the service departments, that becomes part of the competitive advantage.
Exactly. It's a tactical edge built on proximity, necessity, and, crucially, having the right kind of accommodation and support for that longer stay. It meant immediate tourism revenue, even if temporary, while they waited for their traditional markets to recover. They were leveraging a unique geopolitical situation.
Okay, so it sounds like a smart, targeted plan born out of necessity. But we're talking about implementing this during a global pandemic. Surely it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Oh, absolutely not. Even the best plans, especially then, faced major roadblocks.
Let's get into those. What were the big hurdles for Airbnb based on the material?
Well, there were a few key ones. First, and this kind of hits at the core promise, was the virus situation on Guam itself.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, the sources note that Guam, at times, was experiencing its own spikes in local COVID cases.
That's a tricky contradiction, isn't it? Selling public health security while managing a local outbreak.
Very tricky. It undermines the message. Then there's the travel protocols themselves.
Like quarantine.
Exactly. That's the second big hurdle. If travelers arriving from certain places faced mandatory quarantine, say 14 days stuck in a hotel room.
That basically kills the vacation part of Airbnb before it even starts.
Completely. Imagine planning a 4-week working stay only to find out the first 2 weeks are strict quarantine. You'd likely look elsewhere, maybe Hawaii, if the rules were less restrictive at the time. It just destroys the appeal.
Yeah, that's a huge vulnerability. And what about the local population in Guam? The GVB couldn't just throw open the doors, could they?
No, and they were very aware of that. The sources show they tied the aggressiveness of the Airbnb program to their own internal vaccination progress.
Meaning
They might only really push it hard once a large percentage of Guam's own adult population was fully vaccinated. Like 80 or even 90% was mentioned as a potential threshold.
prioritizing local health first.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There was even a specific target mentioned, getting 100,000 residents fully vaccinated by a certain date, July 21st, I believe. Local herd immunity came first.
Okay, local outbreaks, potential quarantines, needing to vaccinate their own people. Any other big challenges?
Yes, a really fundamental one, supply. The whole program hinged on getting enough vaccines.
Enough for their own population and these visiting expats?
Precisely. Their ability to welcome potentially thousands of vaccine tourists depended entirely on securing extra vaccine doses from the U.S. federal government, above and beyond what Guam needed for its own residents.
Wow. So the whole economic strategy kind of relied on federal support and essentially surplus vaccines.
That's the core vulnerability. It makes the entire program dependent on external factors, federal goodwill, vaccine production, allocation decisions, things the GVB couldn't ultimately control.
That feels precarious, like building a recovery plan on something you don't fully own.
It is. It highlights that this was likely seen as a tactical short-term measure. A brilliant emergency response, maybe, but its long-term sustainability was always questionable because of that supply dependency. You can't really launch a massive marketing campaign to expats if you're not 100% sure you'll have the doses when they arrive.
So the main risk shifts from finding demand to securing supply.
Exactly. Supply chain risk became paramount.
Okay, let's try and synthesize this for everyone listening. What are the key takeaways here?
Well, I think the first is just how targeted and frankly ingenious Guam's strategy was as an economic response. They saw a very specific public health need.
Access to those FDA-approved vaccines for U.S. expats in Asia.
Right. And they connected that directly to their own pressing economic problem, the collapse of tourism.
And they didn't just wait for things to go back to normal, they adapted.
They adapted by changing the type of tourist they targeted. They didn't need the 4-day visitor back immediately. They went after the person who had to stay for 4 weeks.
Which, as we discussed, increases the economic value per visitor.
Massively. And it meant focusing on the infrastructure needed for that longer stay, the service departments, the remote work facilities, connecting the dots between an unmet need and their available capacity.
It really is a case study in finding opportunity in crisis, identifying that niche population, and matching it with infrastructure to generate revenue and, importantly, diversify their market, at least temporarily.
Couldn't have put it better.
So here's something for you, our listeners, to think about as we wrap up. Final thought.
Okay.
This Airbnb story, it really shows how geopolitics, like slower vaccine rollouts in one region combined with something like citizenship requirements, the demand for a specific country's approved vaccine can just instantly redraw the map for travel and even for remote work solutions.
That's a great point. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? These temporary fixes, these pandemic-driven solutions, like Guam focusing on infrastructure for longer stays to support remote workers, will they have a lasting impact?
Could this shift things long term?
Maybe. We'd encourage you to consider. Will destinations, particularly in the Asia-Pacific, continue to build out support for that longer-term traveler, the remote worker, even after the specific crisis fades? Or will things snap back? It's something to watch.
Definitely something to watch. And that's all the time we have for this deep dive.